I have a pleasure today of having Don Piper with us. And Don Piper is the number one New York Times best-selling author, as well as he has a part in a movie that just came out called After Death. Me and my wife had the opportunity to watch the film, incredible film, moved us to tears, touched our heart, and today we're going to hear more about Don Piper's story, as well as a little bit later, we're going to hear about the film that every Christian should bring their family members and unbelieving friends and skeptics to go and see and have this conversation starter about Christian faith. And so, Don, good morning, or some people will be watching this later, so good morning to you, and a pleasure to have you with me today on YouTube channel.
What an honor it is to be here. Thank you for having me. I've looked forward to this.
Don, on January of 1989, you were in
Yes.
a car accident. You found yourself actually in heaven. And if you can kind of take us to that day of the accident, of what happened, and how did you go to heaven?
I was on my way to church, which I guess is a good step towards heaven, but I was a pastor. I am a pastor
Okay.
on my way to church from a pastor's conference
Oh,
about
wow.
120, 130 miles from my church in southeast Texas. And so it was a cold, rainy day, and I was ready to get home. I enjoyed the conference, but I didn't get to bring my wife. She is a teacher, has been a teacher. She's retired now, and she couldn't come with me because she had a bunch of new students. And so I was by myself. We had hoped it would be a getaway for the two of us. We had three small kids, and we were looking forward to get away. Thank goodness she was not with me that day, because after I left the conference, I was crossing a bridge, very narrow bridge in a rural area. And then before I exited the opposite end of the bridge, a tractor trailer truck, an 18-wheeler, came down a steep embankment onto the bridge and said he was swerving to miss a car in his lane that was very slow, and came into my lane and hit me head on. And the driver's side wheels just ran over my car because there were rails on the bridge. I didn't have anywhere to go.
Hmm.
He ran over me, killed me instantly, went off the back of my car, and hit two more vehicles before he finally brought the rig to a halt. So I died there on the bridge. We're going to take our last breath here one day, and we're going to take it somewhere else.
Hmm.
And I was prepared for death. I think heaven is a prepared place for prepared people. I just wasn't planning to die that day.
Mm.
And who is? So the moment the truck struck me, I was standing at the gates of heaven. No long tunnel, no bright light at the end. I was killed at about 110 miles an hour of combined impact.
Hmm.
So it was an instant death.
So you don't
And I
remember
was
any? Do
there.
you remember any pain? Was it like very painful? It wasn't a slow
No,
death.
no, no, I wouldn't feel any pain for probably 3 or 4 hours, at least a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours from the accident time, but maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours after I returned, I would start to feel pain because I
Hmm.
was even in shock here on the planet. But I wasn't on the planet. I was standing at one of the 12 gates of heaven. Revelation tells us there are 12 of them. I was at one, and it looked like the inside of an oyster. It is without a doubt a pearl gate. We heard about the pearly gates all of our lives. That's not mythological, that is factual. And it was a magnificent gate. I thought it was a living gate because it seemed to be glowing, glistening, but I think it was the light reflecting off the gate,
Hmm.
because heaven is so brilliant we'd be blinded by it with earthly eyes, but we won't have any earthly eyes there. We have heavenly eyes.
Hmm.
And I was surrounded by people I'd known and loved in life who had preceded me in death. I knew all of them. I now know that they were sent to greet me, so I'd know where I was. The first person I saw was my grandfather. Very
Hmm.
close to him. I'd been with him when he died, actually. Rode with him in the ambulance after he had a heart attack.
Hmm.
And so I was the one that they notified after his death. I have a lot of broken bones in my body, but nothing hurts like a broken heart. When Papa died, it just broke my heart. Now I'm standing at the gates of heaven, and there he is to greet me. He
Wow.
extended his arms and said in a language I've never heard before, but fully understood, "Welcome home, Donnie." That's what he called me here on earth. And I knew where I was because I knew where he was. And
Wow.
people there were beautiful. If you want to be beautiful
Uh-huh.
and perfect, heaven is the place you should be. Because back on earth, to say the very least, I would never be the same because I had so many scars and skin grafts and
Mm-hmm.
incisions and plastic surgery, but not in heaven. The only person in heaven with scars is Jesus, to remind the rest of us of how we got there.
Wow.
It's said that the only man-made thing in heaven
Uh-huh.
are scars
So
of
so
Jesus.
you meet your family members, and in fact, you actually describe heaven as the greatest family reunion of all time.
It is. Yeah, it is. And, a lot of us, by tradition, especially when we were growing up, we had family reunions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were at holiday times or something like that. And I can remember doing that when I was a kid. I had a very large family. My dad was one of 10 kids, and they had large families. So it was quite an occasion. But in heaven, it's a different thing. Um, they're not just family members. We're all family members in heaven, but there were next door neighbors. There were kids. They had been kids when they died from high school. There were all manner of people, but I knew them all. Teachers, some teachers. So that is a family in
Mm-hmm.
heaven, and it is a family reunion, and it is magnificent because in many cases, when we're at the funerals of these people, we don't really ever expect to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to see them again. I just didn't expect to see them that day, but they were all there to greet me. And in the 35 years since this happened, they've been joined by a lot of other people, including my own daughter, who died in December of 2022. So
Oh.
I didn't, not the natural order of things to bury your children,
Mm-hmm.
but so I know she'll be there to greet me
Mm-hmm.
when I return finally.
What about people's ages? Did you see children there? How old were people in heaven?
I didn't see any children,
Hmm.
and some people are discouraged by that because they lose people when they are children. You go back to the creation. Adam and Eve were never created as children. As far as we know, they never had a childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's the age that we'll all be, because that's the age that, if there is such a thing as an age in the Garden of Eden, I think that's the age that God created people to be. We age here in heaven because we've sinned.
Mm-hmm.
The wages of death sin is the wages of death. We are going to die because we are born into sin.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we had never sinned, we would never have aged. So I find the people in heaven ageless. There is no time in heaven, so there's no birth in heaven. There's no death in heaven. It's ageless. That's not an issue. The subject never comes up.
Mm-hmm.
We are just ageless. And so I fully recognized everybody for who they were, but I didn't really seem to pay much attention to what age they appeared to be,
Mm-hmm.
because they were so perfect. They were so without blemish or spot. Or, my grandfather was missing fingers on both of his hands. And when he reached out to me in heaven, all of his fingers were there. I'd never seen them before. My great grandmother was standing beside him. She had osteoporosis and she was all slumped over. In heaven, she was 6 inches taller, and she was missing her teeth here on earth, like a lot of elderly people were back in those days. She smiled at me. It was the first time I ever saw her real smile.
With her teeth.
So it's perfection. Yeah. Yeah. It was dazzling. It was so beautiful. And of course, I had never seen it here. She hardly ever wore her dentures,
Mm-hmm.
her false teeth. She did
Mm-hmm.
not like them. But in heaven, she was expecting me. So when she saw me, she smiled at me, and it was perfection. It is something that I will never forget. I can't wait to see it again.
That's incredible. And Don, Were you also given an opportunity to see other people that we know from the Bible, or did you see Jesus?
I think they're all inside.
Okay. Oh, so you didn't go
These
inside.
people actually came out to meet me.
Okay.
They greeted me at the gate. Let me say this: no one sneaks up on heaven. Everybody up there knows who's coming, and they knew I was
Wow.
coming. I
Wow.
mean, every time someone makes a decision here
Uh-huh.
to become a follower of Christ, a believer,
Hmm.
they write your name in a book up there, a registration book, like you would find at the front desk of an old hotel. They know you're coming, they're expecting you. And so they celebrate that decision up there. Every
Hmm.
time someone makes a decision here, they celebrate up there and call your name. So
Hmm.
these people were expecting me and they knew I was coming. All the other folks, the Moses, the Marys, all those people, they're inside. I could see the people inside, but only in a distance. And I could see thrones high and lifted up in the center of the city. And it is a great city of God.
Uh-huh.
And the brightest light of all was coming from those thrones. And I know that's where Jesus was. In fact, I was so excited about that, even though I was with the people who greeted me and loved being there. I wanted to part them and go through the very thick wall and the very small gate and climb that hill and fall at the feet of Jesus and say, thank you for letting me come.
Hmm.
But I never got a chance to get that close. And in a strange way, I think I'm glad I didn't get that close. I came back to such a horrific experience of 13 months in a hospital bed and 34 operations. Had I seen Jesus and then lost that experience, even for a few moments, and it's been years now, I don't think I would have been able to function here at all. Really, I don't.
Wow.
I had enough trouble as it was.
Hmm.
If I'd seen Jesus face to face, then I think I would have been non-functional here completely, because I was in really sad shape when I came back.
Hmm. So if we go back a little bit into, were you aware of time there? What was was it day, morning, night? What was your awareness of time?
No time, no night, just brilliant, uh, incredibly brilliant.
Hmm.
I don't think there is any time in heaven. Very difficult for us earthbound people to think of the word eternal, because hardly anything. I mean, we look at mountains and think, my goodness, how long have those been there?
Hmm.
We look at the ocean and think about. I mean, heaven exists. I don't think it's complete, because one of the last things Jesus said to his followers were, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I do, I will come again and receive you unto
Hmm.
myself,
Hmm.
that where I am, you will be also.
Hmm.
So I think, I mean, who better than a carpenter king to build us a better place? So I think in some ways, heaven is under construction, but it's a magnificent place. It's God's place.
Hmm.
And he wants us to be with him. He always did, really.
Hmm.
He always did, until we drove a wedge between us and him with our disobedience. So heaven is a real place. There's no time. The reason the name of my first book is called 90 Minutes in Heaven is because the accident happened at 11:45 on the bridge, and a man crawled into the wreckage of the car and prayed over my dead body under the tarp in the dark. And at 1:15, I started praying. I started singing with him. He was singing, and I started singing a song. So it was 90 minutes from the time the truck struck me until the man was singing. In heaven, you're not conscious of any time like that. There's really no time.
Hmm.
It's propelled forward, but there is no elapse of time,
Hmm.
because there's no time in heaven. It's eternal. And
You were mentioning
pardon me.
about singing, and for those of
Yes.
you just tuning in right now, go ahead and hit like to the stream, to this video. If you're rewatching this down the road, this day or next day or next year, go ahead and hit like and share this with your friends and with your family, because for Christians, heaven is our home. It's our hope. It's not something. It's not some kind of an idea that we comfort ourselves with. It's our place where God dwells, where we are going to that place, and we have to currently be thinking about that place, not because we want to die and we don't like the earth, but because it's our blessed hope. And we all need more hope today. And Don is talking about his experience when he went through a car accident, and he immediately went to heaven, and he stood at the gates, and he saw his family members that passed away and started to have these beautiful experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about the music that was there?
I find it a little remarkable now that it's my most vivid memory of heaven. I kind of am a music person. I started out after school, as a disc jockey on the radio. So I listened to, oh my goodness, hundreds of songs every day. So I've always been very musical. But I think the reason I was so impressed with the music is because it's portable. I could bring it back with me, and I hear it all the time. In heaven, there were thousands of songs at the same time, all praising God, for He alone is worthy of our worship. The music is for Him, but we get to hear it. We're beneficiaries of the music. They were symbiotic. All the songs were symbiotic. They all fit together. They did not conflict with each other. And there were all kinds of songs, whether they were anthems or praise songs or instrumental songs, or it was just a magnificent. It permeated you. The music went through you. And so that music I long for it. And the more weary I grow here on earth, in my soul, the louder that music gets.
Wow.
It's like I'm closer again to the gates of heaven. So God likes music. It's a wonderful way to communicate. I've been all over the world, and I've been in many worship experiences where I did not understand what they were saying at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see the expressions on their face, and you knew what was in their hearts, and you were reminded that it's not for us. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it's for Him. And He loves to hear from His people, whether it's verbal in prayers or praising Him with song and instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And so that music is very vivid to me, and I literally carry it with me day and night, all the days of my life, until I can hear it again in person.
How were your senses there? What did you was there an overload on your human senses, or were you were given the opportunity to have total different body that had total different way to absorb the surroundings that you were in?
Yeah, I call it a buffet for the senses.
Okay.
It was a sensory explosion, all of them. Obviously, sight, with having angels above me. Some of them had 6 wings, some had 2, some had none, and the gates and the Golden Boulevard running down the center of the city. So you had certainly things that you could see, certainly things you could hear, whether it was the angels singing above me or the music emanating from heaven. There were even aromas. I know the Bible talks about the prayers, the incense,
Mm-hmm.
the aroma of the prayers of the saints emanating from the throne of God. So all of them, I embraced my grandfather. He embraced me. All the senses are heightened exponentially, and it's just simply the most real experience I've ever had in my existence. And since I came back to some powerful experiences here on earth with all those surgeries and experimental treatments and things, I know now, or have an appreciation for how awesome heaven really is compared to some of the excruciatingly difficult and painful things we experience here on earth. The contrast was stark, and I can't wait to go back there. But yes, our senses, which are gifts from God, are heightened completely. It's
Mm-hmm.
a completely different experience. We can forget what we know about earth, because heaven is not like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so far beyond that. that we have no words. The reason I resisted even talking about this, certainly writing a book about it, was how do you do it with earthly words? What earthly
Could you
words do
describe?
we have
Mm-hmm.
that would do the majesty and glory of heaven justice? We don't.
Mm-hmm.
We can do the best we can, try to communicate with each other, but heaven is so far beyond any words that we could use here on earth that it's a completely different experience from this.
And and Don, for those of you that are just tuning in or rewatching, he's also a part of a movie. He has a movie about his story, but there's also a documentary called After Death. And I find it interesting that in that documentary there was this common thread that people were saying that when they went to heaven, they felt like they were truly alive. It's almost like they woke up from a sleep. It's almost like this world here is like we are in some kind of a sleep, and there is when truly everything wakes up, all of our senses, all of our sight, and we're able to, like even what you just mentioned, become alive, most alive. Most of us think of death as being most not alive. You're
Yes.
talking about an experience where actually we will become most alive.
I think we'll be what we were meant to be when God created us in the first place.
Mm,
And that is far beyond anything that we are here now. I mean, we have glimpses of glory here on the planet. I
hmm.
mean, go to a mountaintop and watch a sunrise. I
Yeah.
mean, hold a baby. I mean, there are things that happen here that are marvelous. I mean, they're wonderful. I think they are gifts from God. Somebody comes to Christ and you see that expression on their face.
Hmm.
There are many things that happen here that are, we would almost call heavenly experiences, and
Mm,
they're close, but they don't match the glory of heaven. So yes, it is so far beyond. I mean, the Apostle Paul said, I can't describe it.
mm,
It's beyond words for me. And my goodness, if Paul can't describe it, again, he's a master wordsmith. So
hmm.
yes, it is magnificent and it is indescribable, but we do our best. And in the movie, we do that. We have several people who had an experience, whether they were in a car wreck or in a plane crash or drowned, or in some cases even tried to take their own lives.
Hmm.
It's a it covers the whole gamut of people's experiences in after death, and therefore the name of the movie. But it's also scientific in a sense that
Yes.
there are quite a few experts in the movie who are highly educated, trained scientists who have studied this in some cases for decades and have concluded that there is life after death. So it's a magnificent film, really well produced and well executed and provocative. And it's meant to be provocative.
Hmm.
It's meant for you to go and answer the question, is there life after death? And to try to steer people to an answer
Hmm.
and help them answer the question, because of course there is. Some of us have had the extreme privilege of seeing it, and in some cases people saw hell,
Hmm.
and that was not a privilege, it was a shock, and they're never the same after that. One of the
Hmm.
gentlemen in the film, Howard Storm, went to hell, and then he came back and is now a pastor in Ohio. So you could see that some of this has changed people remarkably, um, and it changed all of us.
Hmm.
We're not the same. We're
Hmm.
not the same since this happened to us. None of us.
And
And
that's the fruit of that experience.
yeah,
And Don, a little bit more about what you saw there. So you were talking about the gates. Were these gates made out of pearls or
it's
gold?
just like one magnificent pearl, actually.
Okay.
Um, rather than you could say the gates were pearly gates, but really pearl gates would be a more apt description. An enormous pearl,
Hmm.
but with an entrance in the middle of it. And remarkably, this entrance through the pearl is not very large. And we're told that the entrance of heaven is narrow.
Hmm.
It's a narrow gate. to me, it looked like it was just actually big enough for one person to go through. And that's how we go to heaven, one at a time.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there may be a horrible experience where many people are lose their life at the same time, but we're going in one at a time because it's a personal decision. It's not something you inherit from your grandmother or because you're good, you're going in. I mean, there's only one way. And Jesus said in that same discourse where he was talking about, I go to prepare a place for you, in John chapter 14, he says, no man comes to the Father except through me. And so because I had a personal relationship with Christ, that day on the bridge, when the truck struck me, I went to heaven because I was ready. I had reservations. And I tell people everywhere I go, we're taking reservations today. I don't want them to leave without having an opportunity to make that decision, because you don't know when your last breath is going to be here on the planet. I was on my way to church at the age of 38 to lead a Bible study.
Wow.
I wasn't in the wrong place. I wasn't doing something wrong, but it happened and I was ready. So you have to be ready. It's urgent. There's an urgency about this. I was ready that day, so there I was at the gate, and it is a magnificent pearl, and there are 11 other of them, 3 on each side of the great city of God, a square, and indicating that people come from all areas of the world into heaven, and the gates of heaven never close. In biblical times, they would close the gates at sunset to keep out people that probably shouldn't be in there because they had ill intentions. In heaven, the gates never close. They're always open, and they're waiting for the people who come to Jesus, and people are coming all the time. So people are entering all the time. And that was my day, January 18th, 1989, and I entered.
But did you go, I mean, through the gates, you saw the golden streets, but you didn't really go too far inside?
No, I was actually emerging on the inside when everything stopped. I mean, I was looking at there are trees of life, of which we can eat in heaven, because there is no knowledge of good and evil, because there's no evil there. So we eat in heaven for fellowship, not sustenance. And there are
I'm
beautiful
excited
trees.
for that part for sure.
Yes. And I was taking it all in, the glory, the majesty, the colors there I've never seen here, the aromas I've never smelled here, the whole experience. My greeting committee, if you will, were behind me, and I'm going inside. And just as I was about to step in, it all stopped. Suddenly I was enveloped in silence and darkness, and I was very confused. And I tried to make my voice speak to say what is happening. I just got here, and I couldn't even speak. And then out of the silence and the darkness, I heard a single solitary voice, not a chorus of angels or a magnificent choir. It's just one voice. And this voice was behind me, not in front of me like heaven. It was the pastor who came upon the accident and heard God say, pray for the man in the red car. That would have been me. He crawled in the back of the car, through the door. It was a hatchback car, and he got under the tarp with my dead body, held on to my right shoulder because my right arm is the only thing I did not break in the accident. And he began to pray for me because God told him to. And 90 minutes later, he's singing What a Friend We Have in Jesus, the great old hymn. And suddenly I start singing it with him in the dark under the tarp. And I was back here.
Wow. So how long
very
were you dead for?
90 minutes.
So
Accident report recorded that the accident happened at 11:45 a.m. on the bridge just before noon. At 1:15 in the afternoon, Dick Onerecker, the man who prayed for me, was recorded as hearing me sing with him. He got out of the car very fast. You can imagine with a dead man singing, and ran over to the officials, the EMTs, and said the dead man is singing, and nobody believed him.
Wow.
They thought it was his imagination. He finally had to threaten to lay down on the bridge in front of the ambulance that was leaving to get them to check on me before they left. They did, and found out that I was a little alive, not very much, but then I was extricated. It took a couple of hours to do that.
Uh-huh.
And I finally wound up in a level 1 trauma center 75 miles away at 6:15 from a 11:45
But I mean,
accident,
you're
six and a
you're
half
supposed to be a
hours.
vegetable. You medically, you can't
Oh yeah,
be
oh
dead
yeah.
for more than
Yeah,
10 minutes
I
without
had
your
brain
brain.
damage. My head was knocked against the side of the car.
Hmm.
This is 1989, so there was not a lot of padding in cars. There were no
Hmm.
airbags. I mean, there were barely seat belts in those days.
Hmm.
So I was impaled on the steering wheel. It went horizontal. I had massive internal injuries, and then I banged my head against the side of the car. I had blood coming out of my ears, eyes, nose, and mouth, but it was dry because my heart stopped beating immediately.
Hmm.
So I did not bleed out. I have massive open wounds on my legs, an enormous, like 8-inch wound on my arm. All the bones in this
Hmm.
arm have actually been transplanted from my pelvis, and all the skin on this arm came from my right leg. So I have been completely anatomically rearranged, and miraculously, I mean, they did an amazing job of trying to put me back together because I was told I would never walk again. And if they were able to reattach this arm, it would just hang by my side. But as you can plainly see, this is my arm. And I walked into this room, and when I'm finished, I'm walking out on my own 2 legs. So I believe
That's
God is still in
incredible.
the miracle business.
That's
And
incredible. And then
I don't feel
and
very
somebody prayed for
miraculous.
you. This wasn't just somebody was
Thousands,
driving by and decided to pray for you.
thousands. You know,
Uh-huh.
they found
Okay.
my ID in my wallet.
Hmm.
Of course, since I couldn't speak for myself, I was dead. They called my church because my business card was in the wallet,
Hmm.
and told my church that I had been in a terrible accident, but not that I was a fatality, because they were making arrangements to do that and make that announcement in person, of
Hmm.
course. So the church starts praying and starts calling every church they know and asking them to pray.
Hmm.
And in a very short period of time, thousands of people were praying for me. I'm still meeting people almost 35 years later for the first time who prayed for me on that day, perhaps tens of thousands, maybe more, because it just spread across the country and around the world. I met a man in California. I live in Houston, a man in California who prayed for me. He was crying when he told me this. And he said, I prayed for you from Taiwan. So it was the exact opposite time of day
Hmm.
in Taiwan, 11:45 at night, when he got the word that a pastor had been in a terrible accident on his way to church in Texas.
That's
So
crazy.
they're all praying.
Hmm.
God is speaking like he did to the pastor who prayed for me, but God is listening, and he
Mm.
wants to hear from his children. And so that day, he heard from a lot of children. I had nothing to do with my survival whatsoever. I didn't really want to live. Not suicidal, but if you've been there, you don't want to be here. But they were praying, and God said, yes. And here we are.
Wow, that is crazy. So you have a car accident. You're driving from pastor's conference, going back home. You're 38 years of age. I'm 37, so pretty much my age. And then
Yes.
you go straight to heaven. You're seeing your relatives, family. You're going inside of this beautiful city, and right when you're about to explore it, you're getting pulled back into this darkness, and you're hearing this person praying over you. And turns out this person reached out to a dead body that's been there for about 90 minutes, been praying, and you're
Yes.
hearing his prayer, and now you're singing along with him with
Right.
very little of strength that you have. And the doctors, not the doctors, but the paramedics already pretty much said that you're dead. So he goes up to
Horrible.
them and says, hey, this guy's alive. And they don't
Right.
believe him. So he lies on the road so that they don't leave without, running him over. So to force them to actually go and check on you. When they go and check on you, they see that you're alive. And
Yes.
there was also something that he was praying about, actually, is that you will not have these brain internal injuries when he was praying for you, correct?
That's exactly right. He knew the signs,
Mm-hmm.
the ear blood, in
Yeah.
the eyes. He knew that I had brain damage, and he could see that I had been impaled on the steering wheel,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew that the internal injuries. I was missing 4 inches of my left femur, of course, the largest bone in the human body. It was ejected from the car and never found. So I had very obvious
Oh my.
external injuries
Uh-huh.
that would have been fatal in almost all cases. But he knew that the thing that would really take my life permanently would be the internal injuries in my chest and the injuries in my head, the brain damage. So he actually prayed specifically that I would be delivered from those things. And between the accident site and the first hospital where they diagnosed those things and the hospital in Houston, Texas, 75 miles away, I did not have brain damage and
Wow.
I didn't have internal injuries.
That's a miracle from God. But you
It
also
is.
mentioned that another miracle that happened is this particular doctor who was on duty at the time.
Yes.
Could you speak of
Yeah,
that?
he was trained in an experimental treatment for bone extending devices. It's actually invented in Siberia by a doctor named Elizarov, and it involves putting halos of stainless steel around your limbs, be it an arm, an ankle, a leg, a femur, and with wires going through you and coming out the other side, and then breaking your leg in another place further up, and then turning screws on these devices 4 times a day to try to grow a bone inside and close the gap where the bone is missing. It's very ingenious. I had 30 open wounds in my leg, and I had 12 in my arm. And if there is a greater pain than this on an ongoing basis, I just can't wrap my brain around it. I didn't really know you could hurt like that. And I worked for a year on my leg and 9 months on my arm. And of course, I've still got them. It worked, but it is extraordinarily difficult to endure. Really,
Hmm.
every day of your life. I never went to sleep for a whole year. I just passed out from the
From pain.
pain. And
Oh my
no matter
goodness.
how much pain medication they would give me, it didn't seem to affect. I'm sure it did.
Hmm.
I just, if that's the way I felt with the pain medication, I can't imagine what it was like without it. But it was a horrific experience, really. And then 3 years of rehab after that to learn how to walk. I came back from heaven to that, and so I was not in good shape physically, emotionally, and in some cases even spiritually, because I couldn't understand why this happened to me. I couldn't understand what God was trying to do with this experience, and it took me a while to figure that out.
You were pretty depressed actually coming back.
You got it. I
Wow.
certainly was, and people misunderstood it, and it was my fault.
Mm,
um, they thought I was depressed because of my physical condition, and I agree. It was depressing. Truly,
painful.
it was.
Hmm.
But I seen heaven and had it taken away from me. That's what really depressed
To
me.
pretty much go through hell for 3 years.
Yeah, and that coupled with the fact that I couldn't find anybody who understood what I was going through. The spiritual dimension in heaven, because I wouldn't tell them, and the physical dimension, because no one had ever worn these devices on their limbs at that time.
Hmm.
I was breaking new ground because of that doctor who decided to try to save my leg instead of removing what was left of it. Same thing with the arm.
Hmm.
And so he was successful in doing that. But in doing so, I was alone. I had no one to talk to about this. I had no precedent for this. There was no one. So I descended into a really heavy duty depression there in the hospital bed day after day, week after week, month after month, because I was alone. And I was surrounded by people who loved me, cared about me, tried to help me. And I just wanted them to go away. I didn't want them to see me that way because it was pathetic. It was a horrible thing to see. People walked in the room and saw it for the first time and passed out. They literally passed out on the floor several times, because it was just breathtaking to see this embedded in your leg and embedded in your arm. And they had never seen anything like that. So it was a nightmare experience. And one day I had it. One day it was actually one morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was actually shaking my fist, not this one, this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying to God, why can't you send someone here to help me? Can't you send somebody here who understands what I'm going through? If I could just talk to someone who's been here before, I think I can make it. And God spoke to me directly and rebuked me. And he said to me, this is not about you. This is about me. And what I can do through you now, I could never do before the truck hits you. You need to get over your pity party, and you need to turn your pain into a purpose. You need to turn your test into a testimony. And you need to stop shaking your fist at me and reach your hand out to others, and you'll understand how they feel. They need to talk to somebody who gets it, and you'll be that person.
Wow.
Well, I started crying. I wasn't given to crying much. And I cried until the sun came up about 3.5 hours later. And it was the first day of the rest of my life. I started letting people in.
Mm-hmm.
I started letting them help me. I started letting them care for me. And I reached out to anyone I could find who was hurting and just listened to what was going on in their lives and did my very best to try to help them. That led 15 years later to a book, because I thought I could do more with a book than I could in person. And that turned out to be the opposite. When I wrote the book, then everybody wanted to hear it in person. And of course, that led to the movie in 2015, 90 Minutes in Heaven. And then it's led to this. So I try to put something in behind me, Pastor, and God put it in front of me. And he does that sometimes. You're trying to get over something. You're trying to get past something. You're trying to just put it behind you. And God puts that in front of you, because that's what he wants to use to bless other people. And when we're obedient, that's exactly what will happen. And I'm stunned by it. I never planned to do this. I certainly didn't plan to be an itinerant evangelist. I was a pastor. I wanted to go back and be a pastor, and I did for a while. But then, the book came out and just went ballistic. I mean, it just went crazy. And of course, it led to many more books after that by other folks who had similar experiences. And several of them are in this movie after death. So God worked it all out. But I must say, in that hospital room, with those devices embedded in me, and being a 38-year-old man who could not do one single solitary thing for himself, we can use our imagination. Until this conversation with you today, God has seen fit to take the pain and turn it into a purpose.
Wow.
And I get it now. I didn't get it then, but then God spoke to me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think your story not only highlights the beauty of heaven and reminds all of us that heaven is a real place, but it also reminds us that prayer is powerful. And when God moves upon us to pray for people, even if it feels like they're gone, whether it's our family members, and we're not just only talking about physically gone, but maybe when they're gone in sin, or gone in false religion, or gone into some other lifestyle and where they said, we do not want to do anything with Jesus, that we don't give up praying. We don't give up praying. I mean, how powerful it was. And then this pastor who was praying for you and then rallied, how your church rallied around. And I mean, I even read they had all night prayer meetings, really praying through so that God will grant you life. And I think the other lesson that's, to me, honestly, I feel like this is even more impactful, that just because you have a miracle in one area, it doesn't mean that everything becomes easy in the other area.
No, you can't. Medical people do incredible things, but let's face it, there's some things they cannot fix. I referenced my daughter earlier. She died in December. and she died of cancer, and she fought it valiantly for almost 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave her a year and a half, and she lived for 6 years. We would have just been delighted if she was still with us, but they can't fix everything. We are actually pretty frail creatures when you think about it. We have wars going on over the planet. We've got earthquakes that are killing thousands of people at a time. We have many things here that befall us, and we can't do anything about it. What we can do is be prepared for what is next. I am beaten up, but I'm not beaten. I've got scars from head to toe, and they'll always be here this side of heaven. In heaven they won't, but they are here. And then you know, sometimes in the summer when I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, I'll have some kid go up to me and say, "What happened to your arm?" Well, that's a witnessing opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell them. So sometimes the scars on the inside of us and the outside of us are what God uses to bless other people, because they're going through a long dark night like
Mm-hmm.
I did, and I want to help them. So
Yeah.
we just have to be sensitive. You know, you've gone through a divorce, go help some people who are going through a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost your spouse, try to seek out people who are going through mourning over the loss of a spouse. I mean, take what's happened to you, and if you're a follower of Jesus, try to bless somebody else with that.
Yeah.
And then you'll find out why you went through that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple process, really, but you have to decide to do it. That morning in the hospital bed, I decided that I was knocked down but not out,
Mm-hmm.
and that I was going to take whatever was left of me and try to help other people through painful, difficult experiences, not to mention the loss of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I know now why this all happened. I understand it now. I don't, you know, when the weather turns cold and every joint in my body aches, I'm not happy about that. And I know that I broke everything that you can break except my right arm, but I know I have something to do today.
Yeah.
I know I have someone to meet today.
A
There
purpose.
is a divine appointment out there somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe several. So I'm going to do that until I can't do it anymore. I know what happens next, but I know we can make a difference on the way.
Yeah.
I try to get people into heaven and help them have a better trip on the way.
I love that. And Don, the movie after death, can you speak a little bit more into it and why people should see it?
Well, I think people should see it themselves, but I must say, I buy a ticket for someone else. You've got a friend, you've got a neighbor, you've got a relative, you've got somebody you know you care about, and they're not ready for heaven, and you know it. Take them to this movie. They'll go to a movie. So take them to the movie, because the movie is an examination of, is there life after death?
Mm-hmm.
And from cover to cover, that's what it talks about. But it's not just talking heads. You know, people are saying, well, I drowned in a kayak accident, or I tried to kill myself, or, I mean, it's not just those people. There are those people in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very powerful stories. They have the scars to show for what they went through. I always thought it was ironic that Dr. Mary Neal was an orthopedic surgeon when she was drowned in a kayak accident in Chile, and she had to have serious bone reconstruction after her accident. And she's an orthopedic surgeon, so she does too. But she says in heaven, or I was alive here on earth, but I was more alive in heaven. So it's those are the kinds of stories that are in the movie, and they're interspersed with medical doctors,
Mm-hmm.
psychologists, scientists who've studied this for 30 or 40 years and have scientific evidence that life goes on after this body dies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is just an earth suit that we're wearing here on the planet. It's our container, and we know it dies.
Yeah.
We've been to too many funerals, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be ready for what happens next. There is the real part of us, the
Mm-hmm.
essence of who we are, the way God created us, that He wants with Him forever, and
Amen.
that's heaven, and that's Jesus.
Amen.
And so, because I had a relationship, that's where I went the moment I died. This movie is about that. And when the lights come on and the credits start rolling, it'll be an opportunity for you to talk to your loved one about being prepared for heaven, because you're about to get in a car and drive somewhere. I got killed in a car, and it can happen at any moment. So it's about preparation. You
Amen.
love them here. Don't you want to love them there?
Mm,
Well, take them to the movie.
that's
They'll have
good.
an opportunity to think about eternity and if they're ready for it.
And Don, could you, in the final closing of this interview, could you speak to those people who are not ready? They don't
Yes.
know the Lord Jesus. As a pastor yourself, and now a person that travels and speaks about Jesus and about this place, could you just take a moment and speak to them and invite them into that relationship with Christ?
You know, I was 16 years old when a pastor stood in a pulpit of a church. My family didn't go to church. If I went, I had to drive myself there, and I got my license. So I knew something was missing, and I went, and the pastor stood in the pulpit that day at the end of his message. And here's what he said: Heaven is real. Heaven is real. And we're taking reservations today. And I had learned just enough to know that I was not ready for heaven. I'd learned just enough to know that Jesus was in heaven and He was building a place for us. And I went forward that day and I gave my heart to Jesus. I surrendered. I said, I know I'm a sinner, and I was. Even at 16, I'd done things I shouldn't have done. I had been disobedient, and I'd failed to do things I should have done. And I confessed that I was sorry, but I also made a decision that day to change, to turn from the way I was. So it's not just I'm sorry I got caught, it's turning from that and being a follower of Jesus, making Him the champion of your life, the guide of your life, the Lord of your life. And I made that decision. I've never regretted it one moment. And that's why 22 years later on a lonely highway, when a truck ran over me, I was ready for heaven. So you can be ready right where you are right now by inclining your heart, bowing your head, whatever you want to do in whatever place that you are, and simply confessing to the great God of all creation that you want to change. You want to turn. You are sorry. You are repentant about the things you've done and the things you should have done that you didn't do. I am sorry. Confess your sins and ask God to forgive you. And He is faithful to do it. Jesus died for this very reason.
Mm,
That's why He died. And that's why He's preparing a place for us right now, because He loves us. He gave His life for us. And by accepting that, you too can have a reservation in heaven. And if you make that decision and say that prayer in your own words, God, I'm sorry, I've offended you, I've sinned, and please forgive me. And not only forgive me, wash my sins away, come into my heart, and be the leader of my life for the rest of my life until that day when you call me home. And He will be faithful to do it. And the Bible says when you do it, the angels start singing your name in heaven. They're writing it in a registration book at this very moment. They are expecting you. They know you're coming. People in heaven don't miss you. They expect you.
mm.
And your name is written down in glory now. So would you do that? Have you done that? Oh God, forgive me. I'm a sinner. Come into my heart. Forgive me of my sins and be the Lord of my life for the remainder of my days. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Amen.
I'll see you at the gate. We'll all be together one day. There are no goodbyes in heaven, only hellos.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you so much for leading people into that relationship. And I believe many people are going to encounter the Lord because of your testimony and come to know Jesus, as well as people will be encouraged who are going through very difficult time, that God can use
Yes,
their pain for His purpose if they come out of the
absolutely.
self-pity and complaining and grumbling and realize this life is not heaven, but we are headed there, and God can use and redeem the bad things that we go through for His glory. Like Joseph said to his brothers, what you meant for evil, God made it for His good. And so,
Perfect.
Don, thank you
Absolutely.
so much for sharing your story, giving us this time. I know you're a very busy man, and we're very honored that you gave some of your time today to everyone that's watching and rewatching.
It's my privilege, and thank you, Pastor, for what you do and the ministry, the worldwide ministry that you have. May God continue to use you
Thank you.
in a remarkable way, and may one day I see you at the gates.
Amen. Yes. God bless you. Thank you. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, the link to the movie is pinned in the comments. If you enjoyed this interview, Don Piper also has his ministry. And below this video, you can see the links to his social media pages as well as to his website. If you haven't picked up any of his books, make sure you do so. And if you live in the United States, because I think this movie is right now not playing all around the world, from my understanding, but mainly in the United States, please, I ask you this weekend, take somebody with you. Take them there. If you have unbelieving friends, this is a good movie where it's not super evangelistical in the sense that every single word is pushing you to accept Jesus Christ, but it presents a lot of very educated, very smart scientists, some who didn't even believe in God, some who were
Right.
atheists, and then they became believers after that encounter. It doesn't only show what we've seen with Don's story, it shows other stories of people going into hell and then them meeting Jesus. And so I believe they will be impacted and greatly blessed. So thank you, each and every one of you. God bless you. I will see you guys again, and then share this interview with other people. God bless you.